If I'm playing guard here, the first thing we were talking about was having a lead side. Right now I've got a right side lead, and Emmy's got a left side lead. Her left foot is in front, my right leg is in front. With my right side in front, I'm going to use my right side at the toe line to measure the distance between the two of us. Okay, so obviously now I'm at a further distance away, and now I'm at a closer distance. The thing we want to keep in mind is I never want to allow for my partner to just close distance on me and not be contested. So if Emmy starts getting very, very close to me here, I can scoot back. If she starts to move away, I can advance. Okay. The next thing I want to keep in mind is that we have this idea of distance. The second one we have is angle. So if Emmy goes off to the side here, she's starting to form an angle on me where her center line was lined up with me. Now it's off to the side. In general, I want to be able to keep our center lines aligned. So mine lines up with hers. Again, when somebody talks about control, this is what they're referring to. Is not the constant need to have your center lines lined up, but the ability to line your center lines up on your terms. Okay, so that would be me being in control of this position. Is Emmy might go to the side. That's totally fine as long as I'm able to realign with her. When she gets into a side control position on me here, now she's in control of me. I can't easily realign my center line with hers. I have to go through a sort of process in order to make that sort of thing happen. Kind of pop out here. So we looked at distance, we looked at angle, we also looked at height. Height would be measured by the top of my head. In general, Emmy will have a height advantage on me if she's passing my guard. Her head is higher than mine. Now she has to maintain a type of stance where her head will more or less, her head will go seek to be about the level of my head, but not ever lower than that. Okay, she can't be just standing bolt upright like this, because now I can go straight away to the legs. She'll have her head higher than mine, but at about the level of my head. If I can, I'll always look to create a height advantage, meaning I go from a position like this to one where my head is above hers. Okay, so we've got distance, how far apart are we, whether it be measured at the toe line or the distance between our center lines. We've got angle, where is her center line in relation to mine on a circle. If she goes off to the side here, she's got an advantage with angle, and I need to be able to realign with her. We've got the notion of height, where is my head in relation to her head. If I can, I want to gain a height advantage. We briefly mentioned the idea of level, which is where is her hip or her pelvis in relation to mine. In this exact scenario, it's not the most important thing in the world, but we've got height with our head and level with our hip. And that was more or less the beginnings of what we looked at. And then we start talking about this idea where, okay, so how am I going to put this into play? Well, if I'm ever unsure of what to do and I'm playing guard and my partner starts moving around and I'm trying to make sure I'm on the right track, I'm always going to go back to this reference of get your center lines to line up and make sure your legs are between the two of you. It's a little bit broad on purpose, but let's see if we can see this in action. So Emmy goes to the side on me here, and I just realign with her. She goes to the other side, and I realign with her. Pretty simple. She goes to the side again, and now as I realign with her, let's say she goes all the way around on me like this, and she starts closing distance on me. Okay, so I need to get our center lines lined up. So I might take my leg out to the side here, come up to my shoulders, and look to realign into a position where my legs are between us and our center lines are lined up. Now, when we talked about legs being between us, I gave you just two very specific places to keep in mind. The bottom of the foot, right? Bottom of the foot, and then where your knee meets your shin. Okay, so when I say legs between the two of you, I really mean have the bottom of your foot and or the area where your shin meets your knee between the two of you. Okay, and you can see that clearly here. I've got both of my feet between us. If Emmy starts getting close, I can use my legs to make sure she stays away from me. If she comes down to her knees here, it may not be the bottom of my feet, but you can see that it's my shin and my knees that are between us right now. Okay, so now I go, oh wait, so I got my knees between us. Am I okay? Of course I'm okay. Center lines lined up, knees and shins between the two of us. Okay, this starts to take care of some of the more not quite outlier positions, but some of the more seemingly unorthodox cases here. So if Emmy's standing up and she were to make it all the way up past my head here, like this, well, our center lines are actually lined up right now, but my legs are not between the two of us. But if I were able to just bring my legs up like this, I'm actually fine. Again, I'm not in a position where I'm going to be doing high percentage submissions over and over again, but in the position I was just in, I'm actually totally fine. If I'm here like this, I've got the bottom of my foot between us, I've got a long leg here, I've got a short leg where my knee and shin are between us. And you can think of this as sort of the backup for the long leg. Okay? If Emmy, again, were trying to crush me here and put body weight down on me, my foot would take care of that. If she tried to clear that leg away, my knee would take care of that, and I could realign in maybe a more favorable way with her, no problem. Okay? So it's a very sort of simple idea. Center lines line up, legs between the two of you, but it's simple on purpose. It allows you to go from whatever scenario you are in and go towards a safe position and know that you're safe. And it works in inverted positions like I just showed, works in more common positions like seated guard, variations of butterfly, open guard, stuff like this. Okay, now there's other pieces we went into in the last part of this series, but those are some of the big ideas. So let's start to add a little bit more to these references we've been working with. One of the big ones is the idea of a sweep or a knockdown. Now it's useful to separate the two. Technically the big umbrella is sweeps, where I'm playing guard and my partner is in some position on top, and then I end up in the top position. That might be with her turtling, it might be I have the side control, but a sweep has to start from guard, and then it ends with me on top, and it's worth 2 points. Now, I like to use sweeps in a little bit more of a particular way, which is a sweep would be something where I go from guard position, and I get on top of the other person, and I have some sort of advantage over them. I have side control, I'm passing their half guard, I have the mount, things like this. As opposed to knockdowns. And a knockdown being very similar to a sweep, but we end up more in a guard position when we go on top. So I'll demonstrate the two of these, and then we'll sort of see how this separation might be useful. So let's just take a position where I've got Emmy standing right over me like this. Now there's 1.5 million things that I could do from this position, but I do have my legs between the two of us, so that's a good thing. And I've got our center lines lined up, so that's a good thing. And once I'm done with that, I'm done with my defensive movements, I can start thinking about offense. One of the things I might be interested in doing is a knockdown. I could take a hold for 2 legs like this, and anytime you get a hold of both legs and you push into the person's hip, they're gonna fall down. Okay, so if I go here and I just do a little bit of a push here, I can sit Emmy down to her butt. Probably land on elbow or hand, and we'll scoot this way here. Okay, so we landed in a position like this. Emmy's on her elbow, I've got a hold of her 2 legs, and this I would say is a form of knockdown. The problem with this type of situation is when I go to get on top, that's gonna be a battle. And then once I'm on top, I'm in her guard and I'll have to do some sort of pass. Okay, it's not the end of the world. I just get a grip, come up, and now I've successfully completed the requirements of a sweep. I would get my 2 points at this moment here. But you can see now I'm in her open guard, and I've got to contend with all the problems that come with that. Let's think about that as a knockdown, and then in contrast, a sweep, if Emmy's down on her knees here, and now we're to go in and get different types of grips here, and I use my grips to take her through into a hook sweep. When I go into the top position of a hook sweep, now I've got a distinct advantage over her. Okay, I'm in some form of half guard, and it's more or less going to be easy to pass for me. Okay, and you can take this further and further. You can sweep people over your head, where you're going to land in the mount position. You can often sweep people in ways that force them to go to turtle, and you can take their back. But first separation here is we have this thing that are technically called sweeps. If you're thinking about the rules of competition, these are all sweeps. But when I talk about them, I'm going to distinguish between knockdowns and sweeps, for the reason that knockdowns are a little more involved in the process of finishing them. You've got to get up, and then you've got to pass the person's guard. Whereas a sweep, you usually land in a position where a lot of that is already taken care of. Okay, so let's look at how we might actually go into using some of this.
Can I scoot back?
Yeah. So if we're in a position like this, and let's go left leg in front, we've got a right side lead, and Emmy's got a left side lead. Now, because there's no contact right now, the first thing I'm doing is I'm thinking about my defensive guard. Our center line's lined up, check. Legs between the two of us, check. Okay, so that's done. Now it's time to go a little bit on offense. I'm always going to take my lead hand, and I'm going to try to gain control either over one of her legs or over her head. Now, she's got hands in the way. So the direct way of doing this would be just reach up and grab a cross collar grip. Now that might be something that gets a little more involved, where I go to reach up and she grabs my hand with her hand, and then I've got to go in and pull my hand free and maybe reach for a lapel. There's going to be times when you go up, they grab your hand, you hook in, and you attach to the leg first. But we'll get into those later. Let's just assume for a moment that I'm able to reach up and grab a cross-collar grip here. Now I'm going to use this grip to try and control her head, and the way I know I'm doing that is if her rear leg steps forward. Okay, so I give a little bit of a push, and now I give a little bit of a pull, and what I'm looking to do is to draw her leg forward here. Okay, so we come in. Now, while she's taking that step, she's going from a starting position that's pretty stable. She shifts her weight, and as she shifts her weight, she connects a new base of support to the ground. So we go shift, connect, and then she flows, essentially meaning that she transfers her weight to this new base of support. Okay, we'll get into how that all comes about a little bit later. This is kind of true for all of your movements, but notice that when she steps, there's a sort of air time before she lands. And that's what I'm going to be using to get into my initial guard position. Okay, so I give a little bit of a push and a pull, and as she's stepping, I hook in with my two legs here. Okay? So that I go from a position where my legs are on the floor to starting to attach to her lower body. Okay, so we come in, we take our grip, I give a push-pull, I draw her in, and I hook inside of the legs. Okay, now the first thing I might do in addition to this is go ahead and grab her ankle. Okay, now you'll remember that the big change to go from defensive types of guard to offensive types of guard is to go from center line, legs between the two of you, to 4 points of connection or 3 points of connection with one of the one of those points of connection moving. So you got 3 that are stable and 1 more that's sort of moving around and hunting for grips or leg positioning. So I've got 1 and 2 with my legs, these hooks. I've got a cross collar grip, and I went over and grabbed her ankle. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that can go right. There's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong in the setup and then the resulting position where we are here. The first thing you want to get in the habit of is making strong hooks with your legs. So I do have 2 grips right now, 1 and 2, but I'm going to let them go, and I'm just going to have Emmy step one of her legs up off the floor. You'll see that my leg tracks her movement, and she does that on the other side, and my leg tracks her movement. Okay. What I don't want is to have my hook sort of flimsy like this, and then she steps and my leg has no attachment and it doesn't track her at all. So I hook into her legs, she goes to lift her leg up, and it's easy for me to sense where she's going and follow her around. Okay. So you can get into a good habit of making hooks that stick to the other person's leg. The other thing I need to do is I need to be pulling my knees towards my chest. I could have good, strong hooks that are sticking to her leg, but if I relax at the hip and Emmy were to push my leg through, like this can be problematic. Now, you probably have a sort of reflex that doesn't let this happen already, but just bear in mind that it's the hooks attaching to the legs, and then my knees giving a slight constant pull towards my chest. The measure of this, if I just swing over here, is you'll see my knees right now are over my hip, like this. I don't want to have Emmy going back on me and have my knees go in front of my hip like this. Now she does that same pushing motion from a moment ago, and it's so much easier to clear, and it makes a loud noise and all these different things. No good. Okay, so I go. Let's even go more extreme. Can you back up one? Like this. Now you can really see this is very. I do not like being in this position at all. So if I'm in a position like this, I want to pull on the legs, and then I would like them to go to my chest. I can't do that right now though because she's already stepped back. So that's when I'll need to sit up again and sort of reset the position. The big idea with that is I want to hook into her legs, and then I want to retract my knees into my chest. And that tension of the legs, the tension of the hooks, they're going to make sure that my legs stay attached to her legs. Okay, so from the beginning, we've got our lead side here, her left, my right. We're assuming I can go up and grab a cross-collar grip. I give a push-pull, and as she steps, I hook into the legs. Now I go over and I grab her foot. Now I've got 2 grips. I've got 2 hooks. We already talked about pulling those knees into the chest and making sure that she can't just throw my legs by or punch them through and things like this. Now let's add a couple more pieces here. This grip here, this is a cross collar grip. Let's actually turn over. As opposed to a straight lapel grip. For right now, we're going to be using cross collar grip. I've got a grip around her ankle, and when I grab someone's ankle, as opposed to say the front of their gi pants, I want to make sure I'm making my wrist bent so that it has 1, 2, and essentially 3 sides here, a false grip that hooks around the ankle so that I can actually see my fingers here. I don't want to do this. What I'm always looking to do is to block them from stepping backwards to freeing the grip. So I'll make a really terrible grip so you can see what I mean. Here, I'm just grabbing the front of her leg. If she just steps back, My hook makes it a little tough, but it's easy for her to just break free. Instead, I want to put the palm of my hand to the back of her leg so that now when she goes to step back, not only was my hook making that tough, my grip doubled up on that. Okay, so we make our hand curl around, and you can see, there's my fingers, hooking around her leg here. Cross collar grip, 2 hooks in place, and an ankle grip. Now, we're gonna go a little bit further than this. I take one of my hooks, and I make a distance foot here. A distance foot is me trading between that knee and shin we talked about to the bottom of my foot being on her hip. Okay, and this will allow for us to go into tripod sweeps and other forms of attack. Okay, now I could go from this kind of position to a whole host of attacks. The first one that we should look at is a double shin sweep, where I go from 1 grip and 2 hooks and a cross collar grip to just holding on to 2 shins. Okay, so now my right hand is making the exact same grip as my left hand. I keep her legs in place and I push into her hip. So when I do this, my hip will slightly raise off the ground, and I want to start sitting up as I have her falling towards the ground. Okay, you'll see she lands on an elbow. It's like this again. And the reason she's doing that, one, is to reduce the chances that she gets injured from the actual fall, but 2, she's trying to come back and engage in that head fight, or that battle for head height. So if she comes up to her hand now, like this, now she's in a better position to start contesting to get back on top of me. So what I want to be doing is eliminating her ability to get back on top. I've knocked her down, I've got to get up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my knee under her knee, and I'm going to use that to get a hold of her pant leg here. You'll see that when I'm doing all this, I don't pull and slide my leg under. What I'm trying to do is just place my knee under her knee. I take her foot to the pocket of my hip, and I get a hold of her pant leg. Now I put my hand on the floor. You'll see that when I do that, I'm not placing it far. I'm trying to keep her foot trapped up into the sort of geometry of my hip here. Now I can go into a hip heist. And you'll remember from before, that just means knee and foot going back to my hand like this. The reason I've got a hold of this pant leg here is because if Emmy were to try and use that hand to help her get up, she hasn't, and I don't have a hold of her leg, she's going to do the hip heist that I just showed you like this. And now we're in a sort of battle for head height. But by preemptively getting a sense of her trying to do that, when she goes to hip heist now, I just pick up her foot, and it's easy to keep her sort of situated down on the floor here. Okay, now this will lead into a whole bunch of other positions where she might actually go to stand up with me, and then we're both standing, and I have a hold of her foot in the 1 up, 1 down position. But we'll come back to that. What I want you to take away from this is I was playing guard, I knocked her down, and because I knocked her down, she's going to try to get back up. In order to deal with that, I've got a hold of her pant leg here, so that when she tries to get back up, it's pretty easy for me to keep her foot higher than her knee and then keep her down to the ground and start passing her guard. Okay? So the reason that sort of plays out in the way it does, where I knock her down and she's just going to fight to try and get back on top, is because of the scoring system in jiu-jitsu. If I knock Emmy down and I don't keep her there, she just pops right back up to her feet, I probably will just gain an advantage. But if I can keep her down on the floor for about 3 seconds, then I actually get 2 points. And when we started talking about guard, I said I want you to treat getting your guard passed as essentially being submitted. Getting knocked down and having 2 points scored on you like this is a step along that same road. It's only 2 points, guard pass is 3 points. But if you watch sort of high-level competitions, world championships, gold medal matches, and things like that, a lot of times matches are decided by something very simple, like who got 2 points and then sort of had time expire towards the end, or who got 2 points, then the other athlete got 2 points, and then the first athlete almost got another 2 points and just got an advantage and ended up winning because of that. So in this sort of dynamic is very important. Because of the way that the scoring in jiu-jitsu works, there's a sort of urgency that happens when I knock somebody down. They're going to really try to get back up, which they should. And so I need very useful ways of keeping them down on the floor so I can make sure I get my score, and then the dynamic changes. I'll just say a little bit more about that because it helps to sort of understand the landscape that you're going to encounter when you spar. again, if I knock someone down and I get up on top and I score 2 points, the dynamic of a match changes completely. Because now if I got 2 points and the other person has none, I don't really have to do anything for the rest of the match. Okay, if the match is 10 minutes long at black belt and that sweep happens at 2 minutes in or 3 minutes in, I essentially have 7 minutes of not getting scored on to do. Now, of course, you should move forward and go into the submission and seek to pass their guard, all these different things. But when it comes to competition, you're there to win, you're there to beat the other person, and they're probably pretty good. So you don't want to be taking unnecessary risk. And if I knock someone down and score 2 points, it's on them to score against me and to beat me. I've already won at that point. It's not up to me to continue advancing. And so it's very hard to recover from being scored against in jiu-jitsu. Because a lot of times the aggressiveness the person used to score on you is going to immediately get turned into a lot of defensive, reluctant movements because they don't want to be exposed to any sort of counterattack. So when you're sparring, when you're working sweeps, when you're working knockdowns, try to always keep this in mind where it's not so much that it was 2 points that's so important, it's the fact that the score is now someone has points and someone has no points, and that other person now has a lot of work in front of them to just recover. And then the last piece of that is, the reason that guard passing and getting your guard passed is so destructive is because if I sweep somebody, but they had previously passed my guard, they're still winning. They passed my guard, that's 3 points. If I sweep them, that's 2 points. So even though I might have just swept them and I hold them down for the rest of the match, if they had already passed my guard, they're already winning the match. It's already over. Okay, so you can see that the way that the scores are valued, 2 points versus 3 points, also sort of helps to understand why the dynamics are the way they are. Why is a sweep something you can't just sit down and accept? And why is getting your guard passed even worse than all of that? Okay, so we'll return to that as we go forward, but it's just worth checking in on that as we're going forward. So again, we started off, I've got my right leg in front, she's got her left leg in front. I want to control her head so that I control her stance. So I reach up and I grab her collar, cross collar grip. I give a little push pull, and as she's making her movement, I hook into her legs. I swing over and I get a hold of her ankle, and then I release the collar and I get a second grip on her ankle. Now I just lift my hip and push in with my shins and I knock her down to the floor. As she's falling, I'm already setting up my follow-up movement. I put her foot in the pocket of my hip, I get a cross grip, and I stick my hand to the floor. I heist up so that my knee, my foot, and my hand are all in the same line. That way I can remove my hand from the floor. I keep her foot elevated, and then I can lock up on her ankle. You'll see that when I do that, I'm keeping my hand higher than my elbow, like this. I don't want to have my hand low. Obviously her foot can come out, and when we get up to standing, that's going to be even more problematic. So I go up high like this, instead of here where if she pulls her leg, it's just going to come out. Okay. Now, once I've got all this in place, I take my right hand, I get a straight grip on her collar, and I give her another pull and then a push like this. I keep standing up over her body, and now I can start the process of passing her guard. Okay, I might change my grip, I might go into other things, but that would be worth 2 points off of a knockdown. Similar position is same start here. I go in, cross collar grip, same push pull, same hooks into the legs, same grip on the ankle, but now we place that distance foot where the bottom of my foot is on her. So I've got one knee and shin and one bottom of the foot. Okay. Now from this position, I retain my collar grip and I give her a little bit of a push on the hip and the same resulting knockdown. I go knee under her knee, I switch to the pant leg, hand on the floor, heist up, and we're back where we were a moment ago. Little push pull keeps her down on the ground. Now, the reason that those two, or let me rephrase that. The reason you might choose between those two has a lot to do with how tall are you, or how has the initial setup resolved in relation to how tall is your partner. Okay, if your partner is extremely tall, you might have trouble reaching that second ankle. If your partner is extremely tall, it might be easier for you to put the distance foot on the hip to keep them away, rather than using the two shins against the other person. Okay, so this will sort of change depending on who you're sparring with. So again, we start off, we've got this open guard, no contact at all. So I've got to be very careful that I don't just let her create angles on me or close distance and things like this. I go up, I reach for the cross collar, I give a nice push pull, and I hook into the legs. I reach over and I grab her ankle. You'll see that I had this kind of grip, and then I improve my grip as I move over. The first attack, we went over and grabbed that other ankle. The second attack, we put a distance foot right there on the hip. Now, it's extra important that when I put the distance foot on the hip, that my right leg maintain control of her left leg. My right leg is holding her left, and my left hand is holding her right. So I've got control of her two legs. Anytime you've got control of two legs, if you push into the person, they're gonna fall down. Okay, she lands on her elbow, I release my collar grip, and I come down to the pant leg. My hand goes to the floor, I heist up. If she tries to heist up, I keep her leg elevated. Now I get my hand up high, straight lapel grip, nice push-pull, lets me retain the top position. There was something that just came up. It escapes me. If I remember, I'll be sure to bring it up. So we've got our first two really simple attacks, which are just knockdowns, sort of a variation on them. One was a double shin sweep, and one was a variation on the tripod sweep. Now, I'm going to show another attack. I'm going to show a variation of the triangle right now. Not because this would be the sort of thing that you should just learn today from this lesson in addition to all those knockdowns, but the triangle sort of has a special place in jiu-jitsu where it's similar to the back position, where there's an assumption where if you lock somebody in a trap triangle, it's over, right? That's not going to happen the first few times you actually gain a trap triangle on somebody, but the earlier that we start studying it, the more practice you'll end up gaining, and then that assurance that you can finish a triangle is going to develop a lot sooner. So it starts the same way. We've got our stance for our opponent. I've got my seated stance here. I come in, I get that cross-collar grip, give a nice push-pull, hook into the legs, I reach over and I grab the ankle. I use the grip on the ankle to set the distance foot. Now, because I have this foot on the hip, I know Emmy is going to want to get rid of this. So very often, she'll be getting her grip right there on my pant leg. So I'm going to reach up now and grab her sleeve. I'm going to place my right foot all the way into her bicep. Okay. Now, with my right foot on her, the bottom of my foot, I can safely move my left foot for a moment while I pull and get rid of her grip. And then I can come back to where I was a moment ago, and now I've got a very, very useful and common form of guard, which is the cross collar and sleeve. Okay, so let's just turn a little bit. So you'll see I've got a right foot on her bicep, so the bottom of my foot is on her. I've got a distance foot, that's my left foot here on the hip. I've got a cross collar grip, which will always be hiking up high behind the head. And I've got a sleeve grip. When I use the sleeve grip, I'm curling my fingers into her sleeve. I turn my palm up and I pull my elbow down to the floor. You'll see that when I do that, it makes her hand point up and away from my leg. If I just do this, I'm actually pointing her hand at a grip that might be useful to her. So instead, we just want to make that a little more difficult, so we turn the palm up. See, I've got my cross collar grip here. Now, if Emmy has no grip on me and I have all of these pieces set up, I can go directly into a triangle. I would pull on the two grips and I would use my legs to step my hip up so that my knees go past her ears. Okay? I'm trying to bring my belt into her armpit. We go up and then I circle my legs 1 and 2. The moment my legs touch, I pull in with my knees. And then we can make adjustments and go into finish. I'll get into those adjustments a little more in a moment, but I just wanted to give a sort of first glance at the whole operation. So we're here, I come in, I make sure that I'm in a good stance to start, I get a grip, I do a push-pull, and I hook into the legs. I get a hold of her ankle, I place the distance foot, and then from here, I'm going to grab a hold of her sleeve. My right foot goes up to her bicep, and now I'm going to kick out and away while I pull and turn my hand. That gets rid of her grip. I place the distance foot back in. Now I pull, and again, I want to describe this tension a little bit here. I'm pulling my two hands towards my head and my elbows down to the floor. I'm also turning my palms so that my two thumbs go in opposite directions towards the outside. Here. Now, because she has no grip, maybe I've sort of caught her off guard, it's going to be easy for me to go directly into a triangle. I pull and I lift my hips and my knees. Okay? Don't think about reaching with your feet and your butt on the ground. We go up and then around. 1 and 2. Now, when you lock a trap triangle, connect your feet or connect your foot to your knee, but just make sure your legs are linked to each other, and then pull your knees into your chest. Up, around, and pull, and bring everything down. Now, Emmy is free to go down to her knees, but I probably recommend at this moment, just because it's really tough to stay in that standing position. You'll see that my legs are linked to each other, my knees pull in towards my chest. I've got the threat of a triangle completed. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that I've got one of her elbows inside of my legs and her head inside of my legs. Her other elbow is outside of my legs. This is the threat. This is a trap triangle. It's not done at all, but it's now become a very distinct threat for her, and if the adjustments go right in my favor, I'm going to get the finish. Okay? After the threat, I need to get the lock. So at no point should my feet just unlock without something replacing it or assisting in the control of the triangle. So we've threatened the triangle. I've got an elbow and her head inside my legs. I've got the lock. My legs are linked to each other. And then the last few steps will be angle and finish. And we'll get into that in a moment. Now, you're going to hear a bunch of different things about what you should do here, depending on how your partner responds. The main two things I need to be concerned with when I do a triangle is her trying to stack me, which is her head going over my head like this, and trying to create sort of pressure on my abdomen and trying to break free from the lock of the triangle. And then the second one is posturing, where she tries to move her head and shoulders up and away. Okay? It's very hard for her to do both of those things at the same time. If she wants to drive forward on me and go up, it's easy for me to keep control of her and break her down. Generally what happens is they move rapidly between stacking or forward movements and then posturing or upward movements. So I'm going to recommend that you do put two wrists behind their head. You're going to hear plenty of folks saying to do one or whatever. To start off, to keep things simple, take your wrists and connect them to the back of their head and make two false grips. We pull in with the legs. Now I have two hands on the head. I'm going to keep one on the head, and I'm going to take my remaining hand and grab my shin. So the 1 and 1. I've got one on the head, one on the shin. Now I adjust my triangle. I can step on the hip. I can just pull on my leg. I can pendulum my leg. There's a whole bunch of things I'm trying to do, or ways I can do this, but what I'm trying to accomplish is I want my toes to flex up. So I don't lock on my foot like this. I'm going to flex my toes up. I've got one on the head, one on my shin, and I curl my legs to the side here. So my foot is flexed up and my left foot is flexed up. Now I pull my knees to my chest one more time so I can go in and scoop inside of her legs, and this will give me an angle. Now to finish, I want to line up my two calves, and then I can finish this triangle here. Again, I'll get into more of the details of this in a moment, but I don't want Emmy having to stand up in my triangle and suffer with that, or to sit in a triangle for a long time and while I talk on and on about it. So I'm going to do a sort of solo drill so you can sort of see what we're trying to accomplish. If I start off in a position like this, I can take my knee and place it here in the arch of my foot. Okay. Now I'm just going to take my foot and lock it under like this. Okay, you see we sort of have a flattened triangle here. I'm going to unlock. I'm going to switch to the other side. Okay, now I call this a hip turnover, where I've got a hand on the floor and I'm going to turn and place my opposite hand on the floor like this. Okay, I place my knee to the arch of my foot. My hand is on the ground and I'm looking towards that hand. Now I switch, and I switch, and you'll see where we're going with this in a moment, and I switch, and I can lock here. Okay. The reason I would recommend this drill is this triangle should seem a lot flatter than what you might be used to. I'll show this in a moment, what you might be used to with a normal triangle. Let's pay attention to how the two calves sort of exist on this flattened plane here, like this. Okay, so I unlock, got the knee in the arch of the foot. I switch to the other side. Now again, I lock. And as I'm locking here, you'll see my calves are flattened out here. This is the same shape. I'm just going to carry this over for a moment. This is the same shape that you'll use when you do a triangle, not this. Okay, this is the point that I'm trying to make right now. We curl the legs out to the side, which is assisted by the scoop grip, which is assisted by the positioning of the rest of my body. So if I'm here now, locked like this, and I were to lie down to the floor, this would be a desirable position for the finish of the triangle. not this. I don't want the support leg crossing perpendicular to my strangle leg. I want them as best as I can pointing in the same direction. So it's sort of curling out to the side. The scoop grip makes that easier for you to do. Okay, so this sort of flattened out triangle is what we're aiming for when we do a triangle from guard position or really any other position. And this will help you later on when we get into triangles from mount position and things like this, where often this leg can sort of feel stuck because people are used to doing this sort of thing here, and this can't happen if I'm up and on top. The legs have to be used to curling out to the side. Okay, I'm just going to point out a couple other things here, just so we're on the same page. The leg that is bent and underneath your second leg, this is the leg that does most of the strangling, and it happens because of these tendons that are in the back of the knee here. Okay. My second leg is my support leg. It helps out with the strangle from the first leg. Now, in this type of arrangement, like I said, we want to have the calves pointing in the same direction. I want to be able to flex the toes of both of my feet so that we're not like this and not like this. We have the toes flexing up towards the ceiling. There's going to be times we have to go up and we've got to reach a hold of our shin. Whenever we do that, we're going to make that false grip and hold on like this. We don't want to go on the outside because now if I need to adjust using my leg, my support leg is stuck. So we'll always take the support arm inside of the support leg. And then the remaining hand will generally go in and scoop either their arm or their leg. Okay, but we've got our triangle here. I've got a leg that's used to strangle them. I've got a second leg here that supports the first leg. And I want to have those legs arranged in a way where my toes can point up to the ceiling. I've got a support arm that's always going to go inside of the support leg, never on the outside. I've got a remaining arm here, and generally it scoops their arm or it will scoop their leg to help me create an angle and get to a finish. Okay, so those are some of the considerations that you'll want to be having in mind when you do your triangles from guard position. So let's look at this again. From a seated position, we go through into an open guard and we lock up a triangle. One of the things is when we get into that trap triangle and I start adjusting it, I just want you to keep in mind that all the adjustments that I mentioned are aimed at doing what I just did a moment ago, which is to create that two calves in the same direction, to make sure that my toes can flex up to the ceiling. All the adjustments I make are going to be aimed at that same goal. And they'll sort of change depending on how we land exactly, but that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I grip, I give a push-pull, hook into the legs, you get a hold of the ankle. I put that distance foot on the hip. Now I could off-balance her with the threat of a knockdown, but I see she's grabbing a hold of my pant leg. So I reach up, I grab a hold of her sleeve, and now I bring my right foot up to her bicep. Now that I've got a second distance foot, I can free the first one. I break her grip, I turn my palm, pull my elbow down to the floor, and I replace the distance foot on the hip. Because she has no grip on me, I go up with my two knees and my hip. I lock my legs together, and then I pull in with my knees. Now I've got to do all those adjustments that I just mentioned a moment ago. I would recommend starting off, we put two wrists behind the head. I go 1 and 1, holding the shin in the head, and then I start making my adjustments here. Now, one way to capture all those adjustments that you're trying to make in a triangle is to put the lock where your knee meets your shin directly behind their head, and then you'll have a strong finish. So here's the triangle. There's the lock where my knee meets my shin. I want to make sure that those are as close to the back of her head as possible and not somewhere down here by her back. Okay, so we grab the shin, we make our adjustments, we put the lock right behind the head, and we get a good finish. Let's do this on this side. So same thing here. We've got our initial start here. I grab a hold of the collar, I give a push-pull, hook into the legs, and I grab a hold of her ankle. There's that distance foot, there's the sleeve grip, and my right foot up to her bicep. With this second distance foot in place, I can kick free and put the foot on her hip. Now, she's going to be trying to posture away from me and keep her body up right here, and I've got to go chasing after her with my legs. I lock the trap triangle, and I pull in with the knees. Once I'm in range, I grab two wrists behind the head. I keep one on the head, I grab my shin, and I start looking to adjust the triangle. I'm looking to put the lock of the triangle right behind her head. I can scoop inside of her leg, and that's going to give me the freedom to go into the finish. Always placing the lock where my knee and my shin cross over right behind her head. Let's actually scoop just a little bit down. If we jump back into where we were a moment ago, sometimes your partner will be trying to do things like stop you from getting the grip on the leg. Okay? In these cases, it's fine to start swimming inside and just scooping into the arm. Okay? If you can't get a hold of this leg, scoop into the arm, and often that will give you the scoop that you need into the leg. Okay? So we've got the first peek at a triangle. Again, just like any topic in jiu-jitsu, we could go hours and hours and hours on just the triangle itself, but I wanted to just introduce this as a threat, and let's place it into the context of our guard in general. We've looked at some of the ways to ensure that defensively your guard is sound. Center line to center line, legs between the two of you. And then we started looking at, okay, so what are some of the initial attacks I might be going for once I've made sure my guard is sound defensively? Well, we've got sweeps, and we've got knockdowns, which are technically a sweep, but a form of a sweep where they fall to the floor, and then you get up on top of them. And of course, the best of all is a submission. We just looked at the triangle. Now, there's a relationship between knockdowns and sweeps, submissions, like the triangle, and things like back takes. The way this works is, if somebody's trying to avoid being knocked down or swept, they're going to have to do something, shifting their body weight, putting a hand on the floor. They're going to do something to stop themselves from falling. And often when they do that, they're going to expose themselves to submissions. So if their hand hits the floor, maybe you can come up and get into a triangle. But if they know about the threat of a submission, and they know about the threat of a knockdown or sweep, one of the avenues they might go down is to try and turn and extract themselves from the position, essentially turning their back towards you. Now, this doesn't really come into play today, but taking somebody's back from guard is another really powerful option that plays into submissions and plays into knockdowns and sweeps. Generally, you've got those three options. We've got back takes, we've got submissions, we've got knockdowns and sweeps. If you attack with one, knockdown or sweep, and they defend against that, most of the time, that defense opens up submission or back take. And so just like many other things in jiu-jitsu, it's possible to learn one of them, but it's most powerful when you have some option for sweep or back take, some option for submission, and some option for taking the back when these things apply. And then by having all those together, it's much more powerful than the attack by itself. Right now we've been focusing on knockdowns and sweeps and one particular submission, which is the triangle. Now, let's look at a similar situation, which is when you're going into something like a submission and it's not going your way. Again, at the very beginning of your study, a lot of your triangles are going to fail. You're going to get somewhere down along the line, you're going to get it started, you're going to start making some progress, and it's going to come apart for one reason or another. And that's when we've got to go back from offense, we've got to stop attacking, and we've got to recover guard. We've got to realign our center lines and get legs back between the two of us. Okay, so let's look at how that might occur. Okay, so Emmy and I here are working, and she's got her left leg in front, I've got my right leg in front. We go in, cross collar grip, we're doing the same things that we've done up to this point. I get a grip on the leg, put that distance foot in place, grab a hold of the sleeve, float on the bicep, breaking free from that, and I go up and around for a triangle. Now let's say that my right knee it's a little bit lower than it should be. I would love it to have my knee past her ear. But let's say I don't have it there. And I go up and I lock and I'm just not sure, and I just haven't realized that, and I try to pull at the knees and she walks to her left. Then she pops her head out of there and this sort of thing happens. Maybe you've been somewhere like this before. You tried for the triangle and maybe it was the knee like I just described. There's other ways it can happen, but they start breaking free and trying to pass your guard. Okay? So just jumping right into that. So here we are, and my knee is too shallow. I was able to lock my legs, but my right knee, maybe me not noticing, is a little bit shallow. As she starts to go and break free from the triangle, I create an elbow knee frame on that side. My foot, conveniently, is already higher than my knee. So my knee and elbow join together. Now this will keep her body weight will prevent her body weight from being a huge problem, but it's not going to last forever. So what I want to do is bring my left leg over so that the bottom of my foot is on her, like this. Now, what's sort of odd about this is I'm actually safe right now. If she starts moving to her right or left, it's easy for my leg, it's easy for me to just follow her, and she actually just realigned for me. Put my legs, I uncross my legs and I'm fine. If we zoom back to where we were, here, sorry. I've got my elbow knee frame, have my left foot go all the way over the top here. If she goes to her left, she'll end up dragging me into the position that we reviewed earlier today, where I've got the bottom of my foot on her, I've got my shin and knee between the two of us, and so I can easily recover and go back to my guard. Okay. So you'll see that the notion of getting your center lines lined up, having legs between the two of you, the reason that's something we want to keep in mind is because in that exchange that just happened where I went to a triangle and she started to go around my legs and break free, that moment is pretty stressful in sparring and jiu-jitsu, because you went from attacking and thinking everything was going to be so great, and now they're about to crush you. And it's easy to just sort of panic and get pinned and go, okay, let's start my side control escape. But really, I had most of the elbow knee frame done. My foot was already up above my knee. All I had to do was put them together. Then I just take my outside leg and put it on them. And because of the way that my legs are scissored and my hooks are attached to her body, when she moved to the right, she realigned for me, center line to center line. When she went to her left over my head, I was in that sort of inverted position where I still had legs between us. I still had our center lines lined up. So I could spin out from there and recover into a fine guard position. So I'm going to do this again, but you'll see that the notion of overlap that I mentioned in our last lesson, where in the last lesson it was defensive escapes from the back, overlapping with defensive guard. Now we're starting to overlap offensive guard with defensive guard. So that if my offense is being developed and it just is not working out, it's not a totally separate process to defend my guard. They're linked together. Okay, the way we link them together is I go center line to center line, legs between the two of us. That's my defensive requirement. That's all I've got to do. Now, if I'm working my offense, a lot of that will probably be in place. A lot of the legs between the two of you will probably be in place. Some amount of center line to center line is probably in place. And so it's just a matter of realigning with the other person, and then you can renew your attack. Okay, so let me just go ahead and fix my belt real quick, and then we'll look at this again. Now, I wouldn't so much say that you should drill repeatedly, having your triangle fail and have them go around and you recover your guard, but it's worth doing a couple takes of this, and that way it's not totally unfamiliar to you, and you can actually generate a little bit of confidence in the movement for yourself by testing this out and sort of seeing how it plays out. So we come in, we've got our grip. That's a great stance. That's a great stance. I don't know if I should even try attacking at this point. I go in and grip. Oh, you like that one? I go in and grip. I give a push-pull. I hook into the legs here. I grab a hold of the foot. There's that distance foot on the hip. Okay. I go up to the sleeve. I don't break the grip yet, because if I do, I've got no distance foot. I place a second distance foot, a redundant one up here. Now I go ahead and I break her grip. I turn my palm up and away. My elbow comes down to the floor, and now I've got a foot on the hip. Now, because she has no grip on me, she has no connection, it's easy for me to bring my hands towards my head, lift my hip up to her armpit, and my knees can go past her ears for the triangle. That would be ideal if my knees are past her ears. We've made an assumption that my right knee was a little bit shallow. It doesn't take much. So that even if I lock my legs here, if I start pulling and she turns the corner on me, and she's gonna go thumb post. Go thumb post here. She frees herself from the triangle. My foot is higher than my knee, my elbow and knee are connected together. I take my outside leg and I place it on her. My two legs are crossed right now. My left foot is on her hip. My right foot is making that same hook that we started with today, where we were previously hooking into the knees. With my legs in this position, if she goes to her right, she drags herself back into the alignment I want. I can place my hooks in and go into, maybe I can get her leg. Okay. If we're here and she goes past my head, my center line is lined up with her, I can realign, and we can go back in and we can start our attack. Okay, so again, we obviously don't want to go into a triangle and have it fail and then have to recover guard. but it's really not that problematic to do exactly that. The main thing that will be determining if you succeed or you fail when you go to defend your guard like that is how early you start defending your guard. I'm sure that that makes sense for most of you, but just so we're all on the same page, what do I mean by early? I don't actually mean doing it quickly. I mean that you have to make the decision to stop triangling them and start defending your guard. And the earlier you make the decision, the better your result's going to be. Okay, so I'll give you an example of how this can go wrong. We've got our starting position. I go in and I get my grip. I push, pull, hook into the legs here. These are the hooks that we've been working with here. I grab a hold of the ankle. Distance foot goes in. I go up to her sleeve. There's the second distance foot in the bicep. I kick and break her grip here. I go up and around for a triangle. My right knee is incorrectly placed, too shallow. She thumb posts. She turns the corner. She keeps going. And now I decide to defend. This is way too late. Now I've got no contact with her. She could go to her left. She could go to her right. There's all kinds of problems that can occur. It's not impossible for me to defend, but it's much harder than if I had started earlier, back when I had her right in front of this frame. So taking it from the setup of that triangle here. My right knee, again, too shallow. I lock my leg. She thumb push. She turns the corner. Let's try that again. That's not good. I lock my legs here. She thumb push. She turns the corner. My elbow and knee come together. Okay, so I'm just moving my legs so you can see this. My elbow and knee are overlapping with each other. I'm not like this. I'm not like this. My elbow is overlapping with my knee. My foot is obviously much higher than my knee at this point, and I've addressed the problem very, very early. Now my left leg throws over the top. Now I can take my right and just hook at her hip. Okay. Now I know it's a sort of odd position, but I'm actually totally safe right now. She goes to her right, and she ends up lining herself back up with me. And I just untie my legs, and I'm back in guard. If we go back to that same scissor position like this, and she goes to her left, no problem. Our center lines are lined up. I can spin myself out of the way, and we're ready to go. Okay? So, if I were waiting and waiting and waiting, or insisting on trying to find the triangle, she's going to keep blowing past my legs, and then she's going to end up in a position where she basically has the pin. And at that point now, I'm actually having to work an escape. But if I recognize the danger, I feel the triangle starting to come apart, and I just stop attacking her. I go through my defensive cycle, I recover my guard, then I'm more than likely going to be fine. And at that point I can renew my attack, either going for the triangle again, or maybe switching things up and trying for a knockdown. So again, we started off, we were just looking at 2 knockdowns, double shin sweep and a variation on the tripod. We've looked at the very surface level of a triangle, some of the things that you'll want to be working towards, and then tying that back into your defensive movement. I made mention of back takes, and that they're relevant to a lot of the open guard positions, and will combine well with the first 2 types of attacks. They're not really super relevant at the moment, but let's go through these attacks one more time and sort of see how they can work together. One thing that will start happening is, it ends in her stance here, and I come in and I grip. I push and pull, I drag her in, I get a hold of the legs with my legs, and then I grab on. It's much easier for me to get all the pieces I need for a knockdown than for a submission. Obviously a knockdown's not as powerful, it's not as useful as a submission, but that's the trade-off. It's easier to get it going, and it's easier to finish, whereas a submission is obviously much more involved. The big difference is her head and her upper body are much further away from me than her legs. And all I need for a knockdown is to grab both of her legs or control both of her legs. So I've got one, and my hooks actually give me control of both of her legs. I've got one with my hand. I'm going to take my other hand and grab her second ankle here. Because I've got 2 legs, if I push in, very easy to create a knockdown. She lands on her elbow so that she can try and win that battle for height. And I know that when she wants to win that battle, she's got to do a hip heist. So I grab a hold of her pant leg and put my hand on the ground. Now I hip heist. Now when she goes to get up on me, I keep her foot up high so that she can't get up off the floor. My left hand goes up higher than my elbow. My right hand goes to her lapel, and I use a push and pull to put her down towards the floor. You'll see that now my knee is in front of my shoulders here, and my elbow is very close to my hip. This should remind you of the elbow knee frame that we use defensively from bottom position. It's also what we use defensively from top position when we start a guard pass. By having my knee in front of my shoulders like this, I prevent her from dragging me into different kinds of submissions. Okay? And we'll return to this another time. But by ending up in this position, I've now can score my 2 points for the sweep, and then I can go ahead and start beginning the process of passing her guard. Okay? So that was a pretty easy thing to get going. I just had to grab both of her legs, push into her, I knocked her down, and then the real battle would be to get up on top while the other person is also trying to get back on top. Another version of this is that tripod sweep, where I kind of get back up just a minute, where we're in this starting position. I go up and grip, I push pull, and I hook into the legs. We get a hold of the ankle, and maybe she's much taller than me, and it's very hard for me to reach that second leg, so I put a distance foot right there on the hip. Now the distance foot will be what I use to push her down, or push into her hip. I've got control of the foot, I've got control of her leg with my hook, so now I can push into her, knock her down, and I put my knee under her knee. Now I can grip hold of her pant leg, my hand goes to the floor, and I heist up. I get my hand higher than my elbow, straight lapel grip, and we're back where we were a moment ago, and I can start passing her guard. Let's do that tripod sweep one more time. I'm going to show you an area that comes up a lot, and it's just something I want to avoid. Let's actually come just ahead this way. So we grip, push, pull, hook in, grab. There's the foot on the hip. Here's a very, very common problem. People get into this position, and I push in, and they leave the foot on the hip. Okay. Now I've actually got to extract my leg to put my leg back in, and just don't do this. There's a lot of problems that come into this. There's a lot of redundant steps that you'll have to make. When the person gets knocked down, this foot should already be leaving the hip. And the way you know that's going to happen, or the way you know it's time for that, is as their falling body weight goes to the floor, they're going to be pulling you up off the ground because of the grip and connection you have to them. So you no longer need to push them over anymore. Think of it like tipping over a glass of water. Once it starts tipping over, it's going to continue falling unless something interrupts it. Once I've got her tipping over, I don't need that foot on the hip anymore. And I want to remove it so that I can begin putting my knee under her knee and getting up on top. So one more time. We're here, there's our grip, there's our push-pull, hooking into the legs, grip, foot on the hip. Don't do this. Here's the mistake. I push into her and I leave my foot on the hip. Instead, we've got all this in place. Once I feel her tipping backwards, I pull my foot off of her hip. That way my knee can go right under her knee. Put my hand on the floor, grab a hold of the pant leg, and when I grab a hold of the pant leg here, I don't want to sit here and just bunch up the cloth. I'm going to slap and grab for an initial grip, and if needed, I'll fix up a better grip. Where I bunch it up between my thumb and first finger, like this, and then I bring the rest of my fingers into play. 1, for the jump grip, and then 2, my fingers fixing into the grip here. Now with this in position, I heist up, which continues to elevate her leg. I lock up on her foot. I keep my hand higher than my elbow, and now a straight lapel grip lets me put her down to the floor, and my right shin being in front makes sure that defensively I'm not in danger of being submitted or even being put in her closed guard. So again, those are 2 knockdowns, double shin sweep, and a variation of a tripod sweep. Pretty easy to do because most of what I need to accomplish is done at the lower body, and we've already brought the lower body in by way of that initial cross collar grip. Better than all that is, of course, a submission, which today we were just doing the triangle, but it's a little more involved. I've got to get all the way up to her neck. I've got to get all the way up to her armpit with my legs. So a little bit of a trade-off, but let's look at that again. So here we are, initial grip, push and pull, hook in. I go over, I grab her ankle. I go ahead and I put a distance foot on the hip, reach over for that sleeve. My right foot creates a second distance foot so that I can free my left. I'm going to do a turn with my palm. My elbow goes to my hip. At the same time, I kick my leg free, and then I replace the distance foot. Now my grips are always trying to draw her head down. My legs and my hips are going up to her. I want to bring my belt into her armpit and my knees past her ears. I circle my legs and I pull in with the knees. Now that I've got my knees pulling in, if I'm drilling with my partner, it's totally fine for them to come down to a kneeling position. Okay. This is so that I can finish explaining this, and also because it's going to be less stress on our lower back. Now, you can go with 1 wrist behind the head. For our sake, for simplicity's sake, we're going to start off with 2 wrists behind the head. Not fingertips like this, okay? But 1 and 2 wrists, okay? If I have my legs in place like this and Emmy starts posturing up and away from me, I want to be able to contest that with just my legs. I want to be able to stop that when I add the 2 wrists. Okay, now in order to do that, I've got to get wrists curled behind her head. If she postures up and away, I've got to bring my head towards my hands so that my body weight is hanging off of her head. And that's what's going to make it hard for her to posture up and away. If I'm like this with just my fingertips and she's gone. Okay, so wrists go behind the head, my head up towards my hands like this. So I'm curled up. Now I go 1 and 1. My hand goes inside of my leg, so my left hand is my support hand this time. It goes inside of my left leg. So I've got 1 on the head and now 1 on my own shin. I make my adjustments. I can step on her hip and create an angle. I can swing my left leg like a pendulum to create an angle. Let's avoid doing this and stepping on the floor though. This often leads to situations where the person can extract the arm, and that's really not what we want. So we're going to create an angle. We're going to lock. My right goes and scoops inside of her leg. I can go wrist deep, or better still is to go elbow deep. While all of this is happening, I'm always thinking about how do I get this lock where my knee and my shin meet? How do I get that lock directly behind her head? When I can get that to happen, I get the lock behind the head, I curl my calves in the same direction, and we get a nice finish. So again, just like a lot of the other positions we work with, we can try and simplify a lot of the things you're trying to accomplish with a couple of markers. For the triangle, all the things that you're doing, gripping, pulling in with legs, 2 wrists, scoop grip, all that stuff, you're trying to put the lock of the triangle on the back of their head. Okay? Lock of the triangle on the back of the head. A lot of ways to do that. But if you do that one thing, your triangle is going to be 90+% of the way of where you want it to go. Again, as we revisit the triangle, I'll emphasize different details, different setups, things like this. But one of the common threads you're going to see is that they all have this this piece in common where different details, different setups all end up with that lock of the triangle going on the back of the head. Now, last piece on this was overlapping it with some of the defensive movements we've done from guard, just to make sure our guard is safe. The example we've been using is I go into a triangle, but I did not have my knee as far as it should be, and so she's able to thumb post and get around my legs. And we saw that that's not that bad. As long as I address it early, I can recover my guard and go on the attack again. So I'll show this right now. We'll do our entry into guard. I'll go in towards a triangle, and it's going to fail, and she'll start trying to pass. I'm going to recover and reset my guard, and then go to a different attack, which will be one of our 2 knockdowns that I just demonstrated a moment ago. So we're in position. I come in and I grip. I use a push-pull, hook into the legs. I go over, I grab a hold of her foot here. Distance foot goes in. Grip on the sleeve. Second distance foot. Second distance foot lets me break and continue setting up my guard here. I would like to go to a triangle, so I go up and around, but I make the mistake of not having my right knee as high as it should be, so she starts going around the corner. Now I've got my foot higher than my knee, so I've got an elbow knee frame. I take my outside leg and I place it on her. Now, if she goes right or left, it doesn't matter. I'm going to realign my body with hers. I've got my 2 hooks in, grab a hold of her foot, grab a hold of her second foot. For the sake of not crashing into the wall, we turn a little bit to her right. I use a knockdown here, and now I place my knee under her knee. I grab a hold of her pant leg by initially just circling it with my thumb and first finger, and then a better grip. Hand on the floor, heist up, double up, and we can go ahead and put them down on the mat. So that would be running through some of the setup for open guard. How do you get into it and get the ball rolling? Then an initial attack, an attempt at a triangle. Didn't work. No problem. We go to our defensive movement. Elbow knee frame, bottom of the foot goes on. We realign, center line to center line, legs between the 2 of us. Now that I've reset my guard, I go into another attack. Grab a hold of the leg, knock her down to the floor, get up on top, and then I've scored my 2 points and I'm ready to move on. So again, each of these pieces, we'll dig into a little bit more, but the last lesson was sort of introducing some of the main ideas and references that we'll be using. This one was just introducing some of the main types of attacks and some of the main avenues that will be opened up whenever you're playing guard. We have a type of attack called a sweep or a knockdown. We have a type of attack called a submission. We didn't get to this today, but we have a type of attack called a back take. And we just saw how some of those interact with each other. As we go forward, we'll revisit all these and continue to reinforce them. But for now, we'll leave it at that. I'll be back in just, I'll be back in just one moment. I'm gonna get a sip of water and then I'm gonna check for any questions that come up. Oh, okay. Good to know, good to know.
Hey there, Tim.
How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I know this isn't a no-gi situation, but there was a few times back when I used to do jiu-jitsu, I would actually, somehow maybe they would slip out their arm, but I would get the Teepee Choke and go for that. Is that, I know it's kind of low percentage, was that something you were ever a fan of or not really?
Not particularly. Let me just sort of show this a little bit just so we're all on the same page, and then I'll tell you why I'm not a fan.
High hips, I guess, is what I was going with.
Oh, sorry, can you say that part one more time?
I just meant the high hips where you're setting up a triangle and then they retract their arm and then you're still kind of locked in on them, clamping down. Yeah,
possibly. What's going on here is there's a question about, let's say, this can happen a bunch of different ways. In a no-gi situation, let's say I had an initial trap triangle where I've got the arm locked in, and let's say this arm does come out. There are ways, let's say if you're a head stable, where I can go underneath my own legs and I can attack with a strangle here. I don't have her arm contained at all. There are also ways where I can do this by wrapping around the back of the head. There are plenty of variations of what's called a, that's probably the least vulgar name I've heard for that kind of attack, as a Teepee Choke. You can probably imagine other names for it. I would say, yeah, it is somewhat low percentage, and the big problem with it is that you don't have the control of the shoulder, which is what stops them from turning on you. You can go for it, but here's the real issue, is that by committing your legs to locking to each other, when you've lost the arm, you're not allowing yourself to circle your leg over to recover your guard. It's, what's the way to put this? It's not as exciting to recover guard, but I overall have a very, very conservative approach when it comes to jiu-jitsu, where I don't want you to lose any progress you've made. I never want you getting your guard path, even if it means you're going to miss a submission every once in a while. I don't think it's especially in sort of at a beginner level. I emphasize if you're failing an attack, it's probably because something went wrong in your read or your mechanics. That's fine. Let's defend the guard and renew the attack. But of course, as you get more experience and more advanced, you'll be able to make a more calculated decision as to when you might want to actually follow up and go for the teepee. The other element, though, is if you're pretty sophisticated in your jiu-jitsu and they do extract their arm, they're probably not staying in front of you in a way that will allow for you to lock up and finish the attack. They're probably tucking their chin and shrugging their shoulder, things like this. So I actually would recommend, if you're going to follow up a failed triangle with another form of attack, to do it by sitting up and controlling their head with something like a guillotine. Okay, so what I would say is, let's say I got the initial position here, and as I feel that she's starting to pull her arm out, I'm going to heavy leg on both sides. So my right leg comes down, and I'm going to pull her head down and sit up on her like this. And now I might not get the guillotine, but what is she likely going to do is pull her head out and away. Now I can get up and go further in my attack. Okay, so she pulls her arm out, and I try to keep her head down and sit up and attack. And the guillotine, I would say, is a much better and higher percentage way of attacking just the neck without the need of the arm. Whereas the triangle, you need the arm, and for the teepee, it's just not as high percentage.